Hello, my name is Graham Shearer. I'm the Associate Pastor of East London Tabernacle Baptist Church, and this is the seventh and final video in our series on Ecclesiastes, as we look at this record of the words of the teacher, the wise man in Jerusalem, and seek to draw connections between his observations of life under the sun and our life now under the lockdown that we're in due to the coronavirus. We've seen that the teacher has looked at life under the sun, under the limitations of life and death, time and space, and he calls it a world of vapor. He concludes his words in the book in chapter 12, verse 8, with just that statement. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Everything is meaningless. And we've translated that word meaningless, vapor. That is to say that life is elusive. It's ephemeral. It's not solid and certain. You can't predict it. You can't rely on it. You can't use it to get gain, something that you can set against all the costs and losses of life. And as the teacher has looked at human existence, has seen the certainty of death, the fact that misery and misfortune can come at any moment, that we can't predict the future, that we're not able to control what happens to us now and what will come after us when we're gone, he says life is vapor. The world is vapor. And so in these final words, the teacher gives us his final exhortations to his listeners. But given the fact that the teacher has such a clear-eyed view on the tragedies and the limitations of life, these final exhortations are perhaps not what we would expect. He says in chapter 11, verse 8, "However many years anyone may live, let them enjoy them all." Even though the teacher has been absolutely ruthless in identifying the way in which life has sorrow and tragedy and foolishness and perplexity within it, yet at the end of his book, he says, enjoy all the years that you live. Or he goes on, be happy while you are young and let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. And even, chapter 11, verse 10, banish anxiety from your heart and cast off the troubles of your body. Now, it's not that the teacher has suddenly just decided to shut his eyes to the realities of life that he's identified. No, he says in chapter 11, verse 8, "But let them remember the days of darkness, for there will be many. Everything to come is meaningless." Well, the teacher says, even in the light of this world of vapor, you can have enjoyment and you can banish anxiety from your heart. And if that is true of what the teacher says to his listeners, then it's true for us as we live life under the lockdown. But how is it that seeing that the world is vapor means that we're able to banish anxiety from our heart? Well, there's two things that the teacher wants us to do that, strange as it may seem at first, will actually help us to enjoy the days we have now and to banish anxiety from our hearts about the future. The first thing the teacher tells us to do is to remember death in the midst of youth. Verses 1 to 7 of chapter 12 are an evocation of a funeral, of the decay of the body, of human life coming to an end. And the teacher presents this reality to us, as he's done throughout the book, showing us that one day our life will come to an end. The reason the teacher reminds us of our destiny, that we are destined for dust, is not because he takes some kind of melancholy pleasure in being morbid, but because he has a specific purpose. Because when we are young, when we still possess the strength in our bodies that enables us to go about in life as we want to do, we are prone to the delusion that we are in control, that we are able to make life as we wish it to be. But inevitably, we then come up against forces in our world that we are not able to control. Whether it's the forces that are now unleashed by this coronavirus crisis or the myriad of other things that threaten our security. And when that happens, if we are our own little gods in our own little universe, then it inevitably causes anxiety. Because if we are gods in our universe and we are weak, then there is no one who is strong. If we are the gods of our own little universe and we feel insecure, then there is no one who is reliable. The teacher evokes our frailty, the fact that we are all destined to dust, in order to shatter the delusion of our divinity. The illusion that when we are young, we are prone to feel. Not so that we will be miserable and downcast, but so that we will not be prone to the anxiety of knowing that we are a very small God indeed, a God easily overwhelmed by the world in which we live. And so the teacher says, remember your death in the midst of youth. Secondly, the teacher says, remember your Creator in the midst of life. That's his final exhortation in chapter 12, verse 1. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Because, of course, for so many people, it's precisely the prospect of our death, the prospect of our return to dust, which creates anxiety for us in the midst of life. But the teacher says, not only are we to remember our death and the fact that we are creatures, we are also to remember the fact that there is a Creator. That as we look at our life slipping through our fingers, ebbing away, leading inevitably to our end, we are to remember that our life is not the only life that there is. That as we find life slipping through our grasp, unable to control it, we're to remember that our grasp is not the only grasp that there is. As we are unable to control life, that we are to remember that there is another who can control it. And as we remember our Creator, as our realization of our limitations in our life pushes us to lift our eyes to the one who gave us life, the one who is infinite life, then we're reminded of what kind of Creator we have. A Creator who is generous, who is good, who gives us all kinds of gifts to enjoy in our life. As we remember our Creator, we're prompted to realize that the life we had before this lockdown was given to us by Him. It was not something that we had grasped for ourselves, not something that we could control, but was a good gift to us. And as painful as it is during this coronavirus to live under the limitations that we are under now, it may be that these constraints remind us helpfully that we are creatures and that therefore we have a Creator on whom we are able to rely. In the little epilogue at the end of chapter 12, the teacher's words are described as goads, as the kind of pointed nails that are used by shepherds to keep sheep on the right path. And in the same way, this coronavirus crisis may be being used by God as a goad to push us back onto the right path. But as we're pushed by the sobering words of the teacher and by the difficult circumstances that we're in now, to recognize that we are not our Creator, we are not the masters of our own destiny, then we are pushed back onto the path to joy. Because it is precisely the delusion that we are in control, that we are the masters of our own destiny, that the future somehow relies upon us, that produces toil and sorrow and anxiety, that keeps us up at night trying to fathom how the world works. But when we remember our Creator, we remember that there is another who is in control, one of infinite power, infinite goodness, and as He has demonstrated in the Lord Jesus Christ, infinite love. Because we have a Creator who is willing to become a creature, to take on human nature, a human nature in whom he would suffer and die in our place, then every time we remember our Creator, we remember one who is good and generous and loving, and that whatever the future may bring is using the circumstances of our lives, sharp and painful as they sometimes may be, to bring us back to him. And that's why Ecclesiastes ends with the command to fear God and keep his commandments. Because it's by remembering that God is the one who is in heaven and we are on earth that we find joy and rest and peace for our souls. It's by remembering that his commandments are good for us, given by the Creator for us as his creatures, that we find the right path in life, even in the midst of the vapor, of the mystery, of the sorrow of life. Even as we return back to dust, we can be confident that through the Lord Jesus Christ, through his death and resurrection, that even as life takes us towards that dusty end, through him we will go to an eternal home in a resurrected body where joy will be with us forever.